Hey everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're really happy you could make it to an evening with Rafael Sánchez. Yay! I met Rafael a year ago at Participant Inc. and we started hanging out, and I started visiting his studio, going through his archive, which is absolutely incredible, and quickly started bringing some friends over. One is Nia Nottage, who organized the night with me. Yay, Nia! Nia's gonna be taking some notes on the wall in case you get lost. Another one of those friends was Natasha Stagg, who's come here. And tonight we also have one of Raf's oldest and closest friends, Jim Fletcher. And I just wanted to make a couple notes. One is we're working with a lot of old media, so bear with us as we move between formats. There might be a little bit of noise there. And the last note is Raf has a 4-decade-long body of work, and tonight we're just going to be looking at works from the 90s. And even that kind of small section was opening a bit of a Pandora's box. There's a lot to take in. So just bear in mind this is a piece of a larger picture that we hope to keep working around in the coming year. So that's all, and I'm going to hand it over to Natasha.
Which was kind of difficult because there's just so much there, and wording is so important. So trying to be sensitive to that too. But okay, so Rafael Sánchez is a multimedia artist whose practice spans 4 decades, as Alex said. He was born in Cuba and immigrated to the U.S. as a child. He was trained in fine art painting in New Jersey at Ducray School of the Arts in Plainfield, and Rutgers in Newark. Beginning in the 1980s, he experimented with different approaches to painting and sculpture in industrial spaces and studios, working under theater and time-based artist Robert Whitman. And at the beginning of the 1990s, he was deconstructing forms and practices of making through painting, drag, theater, sculpture, and film. Around this time as well, many of his friends, colleagues, and heroes in the downtown New York art world started to die very young. Sánchez took up a mode of performing that was inherently shaped by this context, a community of confusion, sickness, mourning, and urgent celebrations of life. That decade, the 90s, will be the focus of our evening. During this time, Sánchez found a certain sense of freedom from Dolores, one of his most well-known performance avatars. Dolores was an extension of Sánchez that organically and gradually emerged over time. She moved through his life and worked in a variety of ways that are not always easy to map. By the end of the decade, Dolores would dissolve, leaving in her place a catalog of far-ranging artworks, both temporary and indelible. Friendships and collaborations have had and continue to play crucial roles in Sánchez's life and career. Tonight, through loose chronology, we'll look at the body of work that spans basically from 1989 to 1999. So we're going to start kind of by looking at photographs by a good friend, Gail Thacker.
Gail. Is Gail here? Oh. She's going to miss her part. No, she's throughout though, right?
Well, we can skip that part if you want to go back to it.
We can go back to it? Touch on it later? Or we can go through it now because this is stay on track.
Okay, let's stay on track. So
I'm going to do this to them. I'm going to drive them crazy. Crazier than I already have.
Looking forward to it. So this first photo is pretty incredible. It's of Mark Morris.
This is Gail's photograph of Mark photographing me just before I left the States in the summer of 1988. And we waited for Gail to start shooting, actually, and she showed up just as the sun was really streaming in. And little backstory, I can go on, so rein me in. But Gail was supposed to paint my hair in, but wanted a paint job on my head. And she was so late that all she got to was the point, with a yellow point, acrylic paint on my forehead. That's what you see on my forehead. So that was it, and that was the only, although Mark and I were very close friends, this was the only photo shoot, but the Polaroids that came out of the shoot were exquisite. Like,
and you met Gail through Mark Morristrow.
right. Mark and I were neighbors in New Jersey. We moved into the same building in 1985, and we became like, but we were buddies in New Jersey. While we were navigating New York art world, we were buddies in New Jersey, like having fun, and in a very New Jersey way.
Yeah.
The kind of you could have in New Jersey. But when Mark passed away, Gail and I were very close to Mark through his illness. Although I had left for Paris for a few months, I came back to be with Mark and help him out. And Gail was in the trenches with me and that was our bonding experience. And when Mark passed away, we started, as my work evolved, it became, I had been doing performance before, but it really flowered into this area that became, Gail was also, Mark gave Gail cameras, particularly a film camera, and Mark gave us a lot, and we missed him, and we came together and worked a lot together, and we didn't speak, we would refer to Mark and speak, but it became about us. Like Mark was a thread or a backbone to our friendship, and we were able, through what I was doing, what she was doing, we married. It was a beautiful marriage of art, and she continued to photograph me, and we had these photo play dates, like let's go out and play, and we would, I would be doing shows or sometimes not, and there was always a good excuse to do something if there was a camera with us. So these are, this is some of these were done specifically for us, like this one, we set up the studio to do a full body shave. Yeah, it was really fun. This was for a show. Gail was living in Portchester, and she booked a gig at this little dive bar called The Beat, and just getting into character at her house. This was actually much later. This was one of the last shoots we did. Well, we stopped shooting and doing shoots around the turn of the century. This was 1999. This was my 39th birthday. Jim, you were there. Where are you?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Yeah, you were there. You surprised all of us that night.
What did I do?
You did that that ballad by the Irish singer. It was a lip sync. Do you remember who that was? That was amazing. Robert Burns, yes. Yeah. That was So this was the first shoot that I came back from Paris. I left, came back. I was back and forth between, I had a little maid's room in Paris for a few years, and I'd come back for a month or two, and I would cat sit. And this was cat sitting for a friend in Jersey City. And I said, Gail, come over, we'll take pictures. And this is my way to flirt. I was flirting with Gail, It's like and that's what these are about a lot. Yeah. But I love this one because it was really our first shoot.
You and Gail?
Yeah.
And this was in New Jersey or in Paris?
This is Jersey City. It just blocks away from where Mark died, actually.
And you said before that that you started to dress and drag kind of when Mark, was it when he was dying or after he had already died?
Here's what happened. I went out, I'd started in Paris, actually. When I moved to Paris, I became enamored by Dalida. Do we have a slide of that somewhere? I don't know. No? Okay. And I started just incorporating a different way of being with my work in the studio and then bringing it out. Because I think Fausto's in the audience, I liked bringing artwork out into situations. In Newark, I used to do that around Algira. And in a way, this was like a personal artwork. I would take myself out into environments. There's me in Paris. So that kind of started there, and then I was like, Gail, something's happening with me. But when I went out for the first time in the States, it was for a Halloween. Halloween is great because you could just do it and it's normal. And I was very moved because little kids were telling me right off as I walked out the door that I was beautiful. And as a man, I had never been told anything like that. So I was just shaken. I was kind of shaken by that. I was moved. And the following day, I actually went to Pat Hearn's gallery to pick up some paintings that Mark had left me. And I brought them home, unwrapped them, and in the back of one of the paintings there was this piece of cardboard, and I put, what's this cardboard? And I pulled it out, and on the other side was a Jason Gavin original print of Divine. And it was so cute. I wish I had a picture of it, but Divine fanning herself, and she's like smiling, and she's all sunburned, right? So it was like her sunburn is peeling, and I was like, oh my God, I knew that print. I knew it at Mark's house. And I was just like, to me, I took it like a message. Like Mark saying, like, go, just go for it. And I was already, I had just come back from Paris, hanging out like this, and I was okay, let's go. And Gail was around for that. I said, Gail, let's, look at, let's, and I was, doing all these sculptural installation. I love the tradition of earth art and material art. Even when I was studying painting, I was really focused on making paint and what it took to, grind and where pigments come from, and so that all of that earth connection was part of my process and what I was thinking about when I was, doing what became Dolores. And I started getting invited to just hang out in cabarets and, just for fun, and started helping with sets and this, that, and the other thing. It wasn't the normal history of what was going on at like Pyramid and stuff like that. Like, I knew of it, and of course Mark was involved with that, but that wasn't really my scene, but as I evolved, I just was moving along my own life, and it evolved, and I just went with Dolores where I was moving along, and before I knew it, these events were being offered to me
And
as I was continuing with my other practice.
right, and you said before, I thought it was really funny that you've been making art for 10 years, and then suddenly Dolores showed up, and you got invited to do a lot more shows after that.
Yeah, actually, because I would be invited to do, like, there would be these big sculpture projects or installation projects, artists, visual art, and specifically it would say, well, would you do a performance for this art project? So somehow it kind of just worked out in a way, because I understood the context of that, like I was already doing that, so I would bring these pieces in a way that everything was embraced.
Yeah. These are some incredible flyers that Ralph made.
Oh, this was at FIAC, which is like an art fair in Paris, and this is me with a John McCracken sculpture. Can you go back a second? What I love is that this wraps it up for me, because this was Dolores. This was like Dolores, I was in my place, like that. It was just so much. When I love minimalism. I love it, and I love. I find it very atmospheric. And I just love hanging out. I love that something, because our life is so chaotic. I love when things show up that are just, you can just be still,
But I don't think I would describe your work as minimalist at all, so that's so funny.
No, but it's a very important, maybe it's counterpoint to it. My favorite artist is Ad Reinhardt, Fausto, you know that. Remember we go on forever, we made so many black paintings, remember? It's Oh, this was in Holland. I think it seems like I have a few pieces. I did a residency in Nijmegen in Holland. And this was that was actually where I slept, but the back is made of kisses. That spiral made of. I kissed the wall for a week. I made that background for the shows. I invited street performers in the neighborhood we did a lot of. We had like 2 weekends of shows. I invited people, whoever wanted to play on my bed stage could do an act. It was fun. So Europe, and always Jersey City. This is Jersey City. I was back and forth, like there was this.
And
Was
Gail
it?
didn't take this, right?
Gail did not take this. This was my partner at the time, Claire Barnier, took this. And Claire was involved too. She would get into she was a film producer. She is a film producer. And so she would get into producing my events, This wasn't a big production, but, she took this picture. Now this was a production.
Yeah, there's a few of these we've compiled, but can you describe, so you were invited to do a performance at this estate, correct?
Yeah, in upstate New York. It actually was the original estate was built by the dude that commissioned the Rushmore Monument. And so there was a lot of money into this estate. It was in 1993, Bill Arning did a sculpture project. There was, I don't know, like 50 to 100 artists on the grounds of this estate. And that was a situation where Bill was like, well, you know, would you do like the performance part or do a performance? And so I went up there, scouted it out, and there was a lake in the back, and I was going to do something on the lake. And it became this piece. I did a smaller version. I said, well, what do you want? And he said, well, I don't care. You do whatever you want. Just make it memorable, right? And I was like, and at that point, I was not this advanced, right? So I took it as a challenge, and we did a piece. Actually, there's an interview online between Jim and I talking about this particular project. I did the piece on the lake where it became the introduction to what this piece is, which was the following year, because when I did the intro for this, for Bill's show, the festival invited me back to elaborate on it the following year, which became this piece. The first piece was called Bedtime Story, and it really did reference a lot of, I mean, to me, that the white cloth was a bed sheet. And was coming out of having cared for several friends and cleaned a lot of sheets. And for me, this was an offering to my friends that were passing, and to everyone that was, I mean, the center, by the way, all these pieces are musicals, right? So the musical centerpiece of this was Melanie's Candles in the Rain. The dress, it wasn't just one dress, it was one dress that became many dresses. It shape-shifted throughout the 40 minutes that it was performed. By the way, just about all the pieces that we're going to see tonight, they're all one-offs. We did it like just barely run through, and they're structured, so they're really visual statements in my thinking. You know, I don't consider, that's why we were splitting hairs over, I don't consider myself a drag artist.
Right.
It doesn't come from that, you know. In terms of the terminology, like Dolores is something for me that happened. I did not construct her, you know.
Right.
So that's where like wording gets a little tricky, but this is where I create visual statements and I let them speak for themselves. You know, that's how I, you know, I mean, conversations are fun too, because this is, you know, the visuals, you know, it needs, because even the execution of a piece like this, it creates a little community. Each piece that we do, that I do, is like, I often speak in terms of we, you know, who are you talking about, we, because it's like, there's usually about, you know, half a dozen to 20 people, 30 people sometimes that are like making a piece like this happen. So I find myself talking about like that, like we did this, we did that. Who's we, you know?
And who was the audience for this piece as it was happening?
The audience was on the shore, on the southeast shore of this pond, large pond, and they were theater people. This was a theater festival, so it was kind of, I mean, they used to, it was funny because this piece was kind of out there for their programming. I mean, they traditionally do like Chekhov and, you know, traditional theater, and they stepped out for this afternoon to like have me do. But then again, you know, I mean, I love classical theater, and so the structures are in what I deliver, you know. I mean, I learned a lot about time-based work when I was working with Bob Whitman, who thought of his main medium as being time, and I was like, I was still trying to wrap around my head around that, like how is time a medium, always like, it's such a puzzle. But in theater we get to do that, we get to sculpt with time. And and when I do a piece like that, that's something that I really try to engage with. They lend themselves to musicals too, music. But with Bob, I would ask him, "What do you mean?" He would say, "Well, read Aristotle's Poetics. Read these, read the tragedies, how they pace out and how they, deal with time. It's all in there. We listen to these records, and it's like, it's time, and why we are able to dance, because suddenly there's an art form where we share it, and what we're sharing really is time. It's really beautiful, but we forget about that in real life, but in theater we can share it, which is really amazing.
What is happening here?
Oh, the balloons exploded. And yeah, I mean, the thing is to create, I love to create a statement and then you think it's kind of done or you're in it and suddenly like something else happens and everything becomes something else. That's how I like to, that's how I challenge myself to like, wow, how, again, time, it's like, well, how do things shift? Oh, here's another one of Gail's photos. And I see that in Gail's work, and we started affecting each other, right? Because suddenly I'm like in these portraits and we're playing, but I see myself and I'm like, how did I get in there? And then that starts to affect my inner life and my inner thinking. And slowly, from being in Gail's photographs, something really funny happened. I started actually thinking a lot in black and white, and it affected my interior life a lot, But it's interesting because Gail and I started this through grief, right? So all these things started becoming really interesting to me and becoming part of the story and my thinking. And as we approached the end of the century, because this was all the 90s, and we were at the end of the century, and we were like, a lot of reflecting was going on in culture, I think. And I thought a lot about the turn of the last century, like the Victorian era, and how photography and film like came into being during that part, and how I found so many correlations between the 90s, our 90s, and their 90s, and so I looked around, I was like, oh my God, look at all these goths. They're amazing. And it's just like, and I said, well, let's just swim in that. Let's swim in that. And Gail's images and her way of thinking and played a big part in, I was like, wow, this is really amazing because like this, it's all happening here, like all of these.
I think it's interesting that you've collaborated so much with photographers and you haven't worked in that medium very much, right?
I know, believe me, Gail and I get into it, like, sometimes, I love photography so much. It's really it was an area of study, like when I was in school too. I did study it. I did do photos and in some ways, I am one. I just have not, presented my work in that way, but on a straightforward level, yeah, I actually do a lot of photography, but so many of my friends are photographers that I just never,
But you make
put myself.
work that's so well photographed too. it's like what you said, you think in black and white sometimes, or you think in, there's something you said about Mark's work in something I read by you that was about how his photos, I'm not going to word it right, it was really beautiful what you said, but it was how his photos make you kind of live through memories, and now looking at them, you can like rediscover those memories. And so it seems like your work is almost, it's collaborative with photography because it's meant to be photographed.
I just think that, again, I love the way things come into existence. Like if you think about how, and Mark and I actually discussed this a lot, you know. There was that beautiful, I think I talk about it in that essay, there was that, at one point, there was I think in the 80s, there was Museum of Modern Art did that show before photography. And there was a beautiful book by Peter Galassi that was about painting, really, you know, and how it curated paintings in the half century just before photography and what visual artists were thinking about and why did photography happen? Mm-hmm. Like what is in us that created this monster, you know, that we need to record and whatever, you know. So, and Mark was very much interested in these ideas too. That's why his work is so good too. I mean, he wasn't just like, you know, a punk bad boy, like, you know, pushing the buttons. Like he really understood, he thought a lot about, you know, complicated, you know, photography is a philosophical gesture, you know. It's just like, it's a throwaway behavior pattern at this point, but even that, behind that, it's a very complicated gesture that, you know, came out of our human complexity, you know. So like even in a piece like that, I'm like, you know, and Gail and I too are like, you know, we're going around in circles, like with these ideas as we're doing this, like playful, like having fun, and like, you know, it's like get naked, get in the water. I'm like, okay, you know, I put the boot on my head.
So you're kind of switching gears because you were doing these paintings at one point.
Well, I was painting throughout all of this and making sculptures, and, you know, I mean, that, and we talked about it earlier, like I would spend actually months and, you know, like in the studio just working on things, and I then would just need to do a show to get out of this hermeticism, whatever, you know, and then, but so those two worlds started to really overlap in the work, in the studio, and what the nature of the performances were, you know. This came to me in a dream, Fausto. This came to me in a dream, this piece. And these are made of sugar, by the way. These are drawn with Elmer's glue and then glazed with white sugar. It's a whole process that's involved in the way that it cures. I had started a few of these sugar paintings, and I was at Algira in my dream. And Carl Hazelwood were standing under this painting, but I had not made this painting. And we were standing next to it, and we were talking, and Carl said to me, "You spelled universe wrong." And I was like, I woke up from a dream, and it was one of those things, I was like, oh, that was a really cool dream. That was a really cool painting. And it's one, I don't know if you ever have dreams like this, but it's like when you see a piece of artwork in a dream, and then like a couple of days later you realize, oh, wait a minute, that painting doesn't exist. I just created it in my dream. Like that is so that actually led me to like this idea of magical thinking altogether. Like where do ideas come from? You know, a lot of it's from interaction, but even interactions are magical. And I've started to put these ideas all together. And I thought, I loved this approach on these canvases because it was very clean. It was very, I didn't have to think about color. I didn't have to think about, all I thought was lines. You know, and then I started thinking, I was making vibrations with them, like, or whatever, and then I started thinking a lot about the history of line. I started exploring traditions, magic. A lot of these images existed already. I would find them, diagrammatic drawing?
Yeah.
Line drawings, as a bird, hand signs. Okay, this is like, you know, what do signs mean, body language. Mm-hmm. Around here on this, I bordered it with a single continuous line. This is actually one line that doesn't end around the edge. And
you said something about...
Oh, this one's sideways, but that's okay.
How these...
But this is good.
These kind of, you connected... Stay on track. You connected these with your Cuban heritage a little bit, right?
Well, that's it. When I started doing them, I was like, wow, sugar, like that's so Cuban, you know, like that's like their biggest export, whatever. Yeah. It's like, you know, I was like, oh, that's fun too, because I don't usually go there. That's my Cubanness, my exileness is more, to me, is more like a more interesting way to look at it, because I don't address the Cuban background really. It's too complicated. It's very complicated. But with these, I was like, wow, I can kind of go there, you know, just because it's sugar, you know, and just let it be, you know. And so I still do them once in a while. Actually, I would love to just take off on these, find the time to just do more. I love this group of work. Now, this is sideways, but...
I don't know if I want to go forward because I think the next one's sort of dramatic, but so...
Oh, well, so this...
So
I did about 40 to 50 of them, different ideas about line, and I said, wow, this is... And so I did an installation of the paintings at the local dental clinic.
So, one thing that I love that you said about...
So this is 1995 now.
95.
So we're like...
So you have two professional destinations, is what you called it. It's either the black box, which is the theater, so you perform. You do theater pieces, but I mean, not always in a black box, but it's sort of the metaphorical black box. And then the other professional destination is the white box, which we're in now, the gallery space. Mm. And you said that art is everything that happens before you get to those places. So here we're in a dentist's office, and where does that fit? Is it a white box, or is it light? Is it a...
Well, it was clinical, so it was kind of white, but it was not a box. It was not a box. Actually, it was like a local clinic, so it had all these strange configurations or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that realization actually is more recent. Yeah. You know, because I'm actually, you know, like I'm rehearsing in a play now, and that play is actually we're rehearsing in a black box, And we're also rehearsing it in the white box, because the gallery has offered it a space. So I was like, wow, this is so interesting. Like, what's up with all that? But anyways, the space in between, I've just always been attracted to what happens when you put your practice outside of those professional destinations. Like, what does it do to the work? What does it do to your experience of it? All those questions are really beautiful to me.
And so, during the opening of this show, Dolores decided to make an appearance.
Well, yeah, and my dentist, Roger Johansson.
David Johansson's cousin.
Yes, in Hoboken. And I said, Roger, he was really into the idea of the show, first of all. And he had worked with some other friends' art projects. And I said, well, listen, I want to come, what do you think about, I'm thinking about like a performance for the opening, so, we can have fun. What about you giving me a checkup for the opening? And so, it's great. I chose the music. He had a sound system. We put music on. And, my idea was to do the checkup, and then I had everything soundtracked. It would hit play when we're done, and I would do this lip sync, right? But what happened was that Roger said, well, you actually kind of need some work. Like, you got a situation, like we could start on it now, and we could, you can come back and we could follow up. But it's probably a good idea to start it now. I said, okay. Okay, and I was signing consent forms and everything, and he started fitting me for a filling, right? So he injected me with a Novocaine, and I tell you, my whole face was numb. And when I got up to do my lip sync, it's so memorable, and really like with a lot of like genuine drool. And what was really good was I was trying to find the right piece. Like, it's just like I'm really not a drag queen, right? But I love drag performance. Of course, I love it, But and like so many friends of mine like are in that life. So if I do a show, I want to respect the form. That's why I really studied lip syncing as a real art form. And I love it with all my thinking thoughts about time and like what that means, like engage in it. But anyways, for the lip sync on this, I planned to do, I can't stand Barbra Streisand. I just can't. I have issues. But I discovered that on her like Butterfly album, she covers David Bowie's Life on Mars. And I only do Life on Mars, Barbra Streisand. And that was like the drooling, like sugary.
The suburban version.
Yeah.
Dolores goes to the dentist instead of going to the gallery.
Yeah. And people came, and there was made the dentist office into like a show.
And nobody knew that was going to happen. You didn't even know that was going to happen, right? That you would get work done.
No, I wasn't expecting to have a numb face. No, but when he proposed it, I didn't even as I was doing it, I forgot that I was going to do this lip sync. Like, and then when once he was working on it, I was like, oh, well, how's that going to work out? But it's just like, but that's the nature of the shows too, because there's a lot of I like the vulnerability that happens, you know, because it's like, what's going to happen? You don't really know, you know. So that was a real good, that was a lot of fun. That was amazing. As an experience, yeah.
We're switching gears again. So we want to cover these films that we're going to show.
Oh.
So,
Gail took this photo. She was on set for this. We shot underneath the turnpike bridges. What are not bridges? They're overpasses.
So, what can you say about the first film that we're going to watch is called Little Prayers.
And it was filmed actually, this was just a few months after the show at the dental clinic in 1995. And I've been wanting to do a black and white film, and partially, you know, again, it's like coming out of Gail's, being a subject in Gail's work, thinking in black and white, thinking about the turn of the century correlation, silent film. And so I really just wanted to get that done. I needed to make a silent film at that point, 1995. And I was invited to do a show in Mexico City in a church. And I thought, wow, more like a setting that could hold a project like this, a silent film. And we could get even a pianist to like accompany it. I was thinking about all these like old things. So when we made this film, I was just like, well, what's the film going to be? And this is what came out. And Gail, a few friends worked the camera, but Gail worked a lot of the camera on the film as well.
And she's also in it.
She's in it. At one point, you'll see her. A couple of people played the different animals, but she plays a frog. And the one that's clapping. There's the different frogs. Okay, we can do it, right? Is it?
I think it's theme so just so everyone knows, this film is about 12 minutes long. And then I think we're going to go right into the next one after that.
Okay.
So the next film is about 5 minutes, and it's a performance piece. It wasn't like, it's not an edited film, it's
No, it's kind of raw performance.
Yeah, and that is also filmed by Gail, actually, right?
Gail shot it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is chronologically the next.
That was a year later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see that after.
Okay, we're just using old media, so there's a lot of...
Tracking and stuff. And the music for this one, so you said you were going to use a piano, but that isn't what happened, right?
No, we did.
You
in
did
Mexico.
in the church?
I think this needs to be rewound. So yeah, it was. I may have. I think that might have been my screw up. Remember? Remember the library? You don't remember borrowing.
No, I do remember.
Videotapes.
I'm not
Actual-
as young as you think I am.
Actual VHS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, I remember this.
Be kind, rewind.
Yeah.
You can get a fine from the library
yeah.
if you didn't rewind.
Yeah.
Or the video store would fine you sometimes.
Yeah, the library would. The Blockbuster would, though.
Blockbuster totally fined you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you knew Blockbuster, yeah, you were around for that.
Yeah, I was hurt. Do we know, like, when it's gonna... Anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
This is the
Here
vulnerability
it
that
is.
you were talking about.
Yeah, okay.
Sound?
if you want.
Yeah.
It's kind of intense for me to see these.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at this last week for the first time in I don't know how many years. So much has happened, you know? I mean, what was
And
that?
that was-
25 years ago? I don't
It was
know.
filmed in 95, you said?
Yeah, 20,
Yeah.
27 years? No, 22 years ago? Anyways, so what this led to, I wanted, from there, I kind of wanted to, I love that art form. I love the art form of silent film. It was hard to do it. Already at that time, it wasn't easy to work with film. We still had to edit. By then, you had to edit on Avid or, you know, transfer it to video and all of that business, which kind of broke my heart, you know. That's probably why I didn't continue, because I really did want to, like, explore film. I've shot it on film, but then, like, the putting together, I don't know. But in my thinking, I didn't do it right away, but in my thinking, I had created an ambition to bring the silent film into a real-time experience and to create theater that would feel like silent cinema. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I didn't go there right away. I had some other things that I explored, but it was in the back of my mind. It was percolating after doing this and a couple of other shorts and playing with the medium a little bit. And of course continuing to work with Gail. You know, I loved it. I loved the feeling. I loved how that resonated for me.
And can you talk about Dolores' role in this film? Like, who is she? What is the transformation she takes when she's knocked out?
Oh, I think it's just a human hope to just be in a better place, you know? I think it's just kind of an archetypal hope to just that life could become like the things we dream about, you know?
Yeah.
I think we all have that, but also, I mean, for me, again, it's the recurring theme of exile, this film. You know, it's titled Little Prayers.
Right.
The little prayer for everything, a little prayer for like the basic needs of our soul, to me, this film. And it's a little prayer to, you know, again, it's the ongoing, it's exile, but it's also a desire to be with those that are lost, you know. Oh, what I want to mention with the storyline as it evolved with the animals, after doing the sugar paintings and thinking about magic too, like animals started to figure in more in my thinking. And I started developing characters. That's what actually Dolores started to like slip away during this. And as I did animal characters, it had another energy. And then Dolores really kind of slipped out the back door and became, for me, more about, it could be so many things. And that's when it really, people were starting to write about my work a little bit, and the constant was like a shape-shifting, work, you know, and I like that. I felt comfortable with that. This, for example, was very much about exile. It's a constant theme throughout all the work. It's like not like who are we, where are we, how do we, what is home? Don't really have one, you know. I think that's also a universal feeling. I think we all have. Oh, here's the the next piece. Okay. So this is in a garden in Brooklyn.
Okay.
About a year later. The end of the piece. That was the end of a longer piece. That was the main piece in that performance was Yoko Ono's Rising, which is more Yoko in the sense that it's, so I just thought that was more like the sounds that a flower would really make, so I found a typewritten letter I sent to Yoko to let her know I was going to do the piece, because I actually like to ask permission when I do these musical numbers, and I just wanted to let her know that we're doing it and that maybe she would give me permission, but whatever. I just my conscience was clear, right? So the longer piece was Rising, right? So it was about more. I just thought it was a beautiful correlation for a flower, rising, and also. It's an energy piece. It's an energy piece about strength, and on the same record, this song comes in, and it's her, of course, I mean, I get very sad when I hear that song for many reasons, but it's also her song to John. You know, it's a goodbye song to John, and I just thought that song is so beautiful, and how can you do justice to such a gesture? You know, so I try to choose pieces that would, you know, live up to the song, you know.
So it was around this time that you met.
Well, Jim and I were, I think I'll let you talk a little bit, but we had known each other a little bit.
Rafael and I worked together. I don't like to say this in art galleries, but yeah, we worked as art handlers. And that's how I knew him.
I was working the loading dock.
Yeah, he
and
worked
you
the
were working
loading
the
dock.
trucks.
I was in trucks, yeah. And I went to that performance that you just saw the film of. And I had an office in Chelsea, and I wrote this for him and sent it to him. And that's how we became really very close. And then I joined him in his next work. I would go and see everything that he did after that point because I was so moved by it. And eventually I joined him in works that he was making, and that's how I became a performer. So here's the thing I wrote for him.
Jim, can I qualify that?
Oh yeah, please.
I was minding my own business one day, and this came in out of the blue via fax.
Right.
Out of the blue.
That's right. Rafael Sanchez's Life of a Flower. And the epigraph is from Robert Herrick. Fair daffodils, we weep to see you haste away so soon. Rafael Sánchez did his flower piece last night in the garden behind Vicio Studios on President Street in Park Slope. And it's one of the prettiest, saddest things I've ever seen. It's late October. Alex's garden is bedraggled. Big dry stalks and unruly greens tangled up with late spent grasses. Imagine it after a snowfall and everything a detail under it. Well, it wasn't cold out at all. There was an ambient warmth, apparently a goodbye, from all the sunny earth and vegetable masses distilled out of vintage summer. The moon was up with a veil of thinnest lawn or tulle for the occasion, and she had a ring, oh stately radius, around her. As Rafi told me later, she was pulsating, which is true because the ring faded or was lost so soon afterwards. So we were standing on the deck looking down on the garden plot. Others were down at garden level. We could hear them laugh or clap occasionally. Others behind and above us looking out from the second floor windows. Others in other houses looking out as neighbors. As I remember, there were 4 pieces of music: the organ piece and the goodbye piece. The organ piece seemed to be coming from out of the black trees in the back corner of Alex's garden. Primitive, almost Halloween-like organ, not scary or gothic, but having a cheapness and fullness. Sometimes lights would come up from in the grass and nod back down. The garden was scattered with balloons, around like pumpkins in a patch, also like roses. I'd been to the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens earlier in the day and seen, to my surprise, a lot of roses in the big fenced-in rows milling around. What did they look like more than balloons in the grass? Anyway, in the middle of the patch was one big white one, the mother balloon about chest high. So, while the organ music played, you could take this in slowly. There was always plenty of time to take everything in. But when it was done, everything was really finished and gone. The queen balloon was floating off into the bright ring of the moon itself, and she and her train of little bright ones were full on the inside with the moon's light. You could see it. A plane flew across the ring and people clapped. A few of us watched it as long as we could see it. I saw it as a speck low over the roof, then it blinked away. It was so fairy-like and sad, like being stumped again by love. I should add that in the heaven-bound train there was also a star, flat, star-shaped, covered with aluminum foil. But we're ahead of ourselves and have skipped the entire performance, our flower. Let's just go to the end, when the air balloon was beginning to pull up from the ground and take the colored ones with it, but was still tangled up. Rafael, dressed beautifully as a flower on a thin stem, while enacting with all due slowness the erotic death of a flower, did to perfection, as far as I could tell, a difficult lip-syncing performance of a piece by Yoko Ono, the final goodbye piece, whose vocals consisted mostly of non-verbal convulsions. Rafael supplied the facial expressions like an opera singer's, quite distorted at times, which must have also accompanied the original recording of the piece. It's like you couldn't make those sounds without making those faces. And the sounds themselves seemed involuntary. They were sung with, but not to, a rhythm track. For virtuosity, it could be compared to doing one of those jigsaw puzzles whose images are no help at all in placing the pieces. His precision, or perfection, made the performance not only beautiful, but shocking. It was like a sacrifice, like a love sacrifice. Not a tawdry copy, but a fleeting, amazing act. October 1996.
I was so moved to receive that, Jim. I still am. And that is just such a beautiful piece of writing. And we were buddies up till then, but then I was like, my friend is a writer. And I was like, I felt such a beautiful connection that stays to this day.
I want to just give you explicit tribute for bringing me into this world, this glittering world, you know. And my conversations with Rafael, you know, he can expand on a subject, you know, as you know, and I've been, I've been privy to conversations with him over all these years. I mean, on telephones, back when the telephones had really good audio, you know, and so I like this thing about the different media that we use. It's really great, you know, to think of the fax machine, you wanting to use film, and even the medium of painting. He liked to, like he said, he was into what actual substance do you use to make the color that you use. You know, it's like to make barn red. What substance do you use? It's very about what material, not just materials, but machines are you using.
Yeah, and tonight is like that too, because we were trying to figure out how we're going to present. How do you present all of this media, you know? And at a certain point, it was like, look, Nia, I remember you were over and like, what, how we handle this? We don't have time, right? We don't have time to transfer and digitize and all this interfacing. Finally, I was just like, here, well, why don't we just use this tape deck? Like, just use this, like, cassette records and digitize what we can, and it's like that has its own quality. I think we're living in an age of, I mean, it's not a secret, but I think today's medium is really interface.
Yeah.
It's like where everything meets is the current medium. I think that's how our time will be seen, the era of interface.
I want to ask about this play, this musical,
Oh.
as one kind of last 2 years.
Well,
Yes, I was. This was my first show I was ever in. And I came on just to help him make these sets, you know. But I would like to say that what Rafael did was he always did it the hard way, you know, like you know, so much by hand and taking plenty of time. And this would have been sketched out in a book. He showed me the book before any of this was made, and it did come out looking like the book. And this was spray painted onto foam core,
Yeah.
and it's just so beautiful when it would come out. But he, you know, everything was done slowly, you know, with time. I don't know how to say it. He once told me about how his father got on him about people who eat too quickly, and Rafael got on me a few times about walking too quickly, you know. So there's something about your thing about time. I take it to heart.
And this is a play set to the libation bearers.
this was, okay. I gotta shout out to Leah Gangitano, because I mean, a lot of this, all of this, there was so much serendipity. I think, first of all, when you do what you love and you just go for it, serendipity will happen. Because we did these things, we never had any money. It's all done with serendipity. And the next chapter, which is actually, I think it's going to close out this decade, because, well, there's this in-between part here. We're seeing pictures, because while all this was evolving, now we're doing little shows, okay? Different nights, different cabaret nights, art nights. There, you know, New York had those venues where things were, you could do spontaneous work like this. And so I was busy with that, just going out, enjoying, oh my God, like, there was a lot of work. It didn't feel like work. That's the thing, right? It didn't feel like work. But it was a lot of work. This is iconic photo that Gail took of me preparing for a show at Jackie 60. Hattie Hathaway organized. We do these beautiful theme nights. Oh my God. Those nights were great. There was so much beautiful. Oh, this is back. This is at my... This would be, oh God, a lot of these are Gail's now. I gotta stay on track.
Sorry.
Libation Bearers started with a phone call from Leah Gangitano. First came to New York and was setting up programming for thread waxing space. I have a slot for if you want to do something. It could be kind of big if you want. We could figure out how to make it happen. And the night before, I was at hanging out with Mark Neston and Mike Grimes. They had a they would have these beautiful, great, like soirees or afternoons. Actually, this was an afternoon party, and they had turntables always playing music. Mark had, and Mike had great record collection. And, but they had this massive TV, and it would always be playing some movie. And they had Clash of the Titans, the Ray Harryhausen film. So all of a sudden, at one point, a Queen song came on, and the room was agag watching the soundtrack of, I can't even remember the Queen song, but Freddie's lyrics over this Greek story, and sets and whatever, and the sound was down, music was over it, and Leah called next day asking, hey, you have any ideas? I said, how about a Greek tragedy all set to Queen, early Queen, the first 3 records. And no hits, just like, you know, meaty, crazy, no synthesizers, Queen. And she was like, yeah, great sound, put it down. So we went right to it, and like that was at the end of 1990, fall of 97, 1998 became all about creating this play. And one of the first people I asked, I told about was Jim. And I said, Jim, you know, I'm working on this thing. I think I had just finished the libretto. And what do you think? You want to help me with this? Because I'm going to need some help. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll do whatever. I love it. I have a book stand on Hudson Street in front of my apartment. It's kind of my gig, right? Selling books. And I said, well, come over and look at the libretto. I'm going to be out in the books. I was doing my business. Jim sat and read every page, because it was a big libretto, right? It was like formidable. And are you okay? Are you know? It's just like, and he's like, no, I'm reading. Jim sat there for 2 hours in a chair while I was vending. He came over, I remember he came over, put the libretto down on the table. I was like, Rafael, I'd be glad to do whatever you need me to do on this play. That's how it went down. And from there on in, and we start, well, I could use help on the sets. That's how it started. And I just loved being with this man so much. And once we started casting, as you know, I said, well, I need a leader. I need a tall person to lead the chorus, Jim. And
I mean, I didn't think of myself as the leader of the chorus. It was just, we were lined up from shortest to tallest. And, it was kind of like, also felt like the caboose, you know, but yeah, that show was a knockout. It was incredible.
well, and then before we knew it, we just were loving Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury became like such a life force for everybody involved in that play. And again, it was like, well, this is what this work is about, you know? This is like honor. It's about honor.
I mean, imagine it's a Greek tragedy, like a real early Greek tragedy, Aeschylus, all done through the words of these early Queen songs, and it worked perfectly. Somehow, it exploded in its bright forms that you would have never imagined.
And we did it all in black and white.
Yeah.
Everything was black and white. It was like my push for my dream to do a live silent film.
So you were painted in shades of black and white?
Yes.
Yeah, there was even a curtain. The curtain was painted on foam core. It was we could have had a curtain, but it was a curtain painted onto foam core with spray paint, just like the other parts of the set. Yeah, it's kind of like lip syncing. We lip synced the curtain as well, even though
right, and then it was just like it's fascinating. Lip syncing continued to fascinate me because it's like that, and especially like silent film and like miming and all of that. Like, there's just this strange suspension of reality, you know? Because actually, all of us can actually kind of sing, right? And it's like, and we've done that. But lip syncing, in terms of like because what I was doing was like marrying visual art, and it almost like, I don't know, it's something it still perplexes me, but there's something dynamic there for me that, you know, that we're faking it. That we're faking it is like so great, you know?
You guys have done lip sync together too. You performed together.
Oh yeah, we've done several performances together. Yeah,
Yeah.
made other yeah.
When was the last time that happened?
Was it the ZZ Top one? Was that the last one?
Oh, yeah. Well, this was like now we're like in this century, right?
Yeah.
And I grew my beard out.
Right.
At one point, like, it grew like long, right? And so, Jim, do you want to do a ZZ Top?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we did it. We toured it a little bit, right? We did it at a few.
Yeah, we did Miami. Miami.
We went to
and
Miami.
A couple places here.
We did a couple of places, venues here. Actually, we did it at when they had Rapture Cafe. Didn't we do it at Rapture? Or the Gershwin? Anyways,
We did it both
we did
places.
ZZ Top.
Yeah.
I think that was the last. The live side of Fandango record. So it was all these blue, like ZZ Top doing the blues.
Have you both guys doing lip sync tonight? Just for old time's sake.
What's that?
Like you do lip sync tonight.
Lip-
Together.
Was
what?
wait a minute.
What-
This,
I'm just hanging out there and it's a beach show.
what do you think? You could just like make it up?
Yeah.
Like,
Like,
You got,
it kind of goes with the, what you're saying.
you got records over there.
Vulnerability or makes it better. Kind of a spur of the moment thing.
We probably need one
do
more
you have
person.
One more
what?
person.
Something everybody knows.
Maybe Jorge could be part of it.
Jorge's here.
Yeah, we can.
Hey, hi Jorge.
Are you ready?
You're there? Can we get another projection? Can we put a video on? Which one? Nice to meet you.
every time I thought I got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. So I turned myself to face me, but I've never caught a glimpse how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test. Change it, turn and face the strain. Change it, you wanna be a richer man. Change it, turn and face the strain. Change it, it's gonna have to be a different man. Time may change me, but I can't wait down. Yeah. I watch the ripples change their size, but never leave the stream of warm and permanent sand. So the days float through my eyes, but still the days seem the same. And these children that you spit on as they try to change their worlds are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through. Change it, turn and face the strain. Change it, don't tell them to grow up out of it.